Welcome to Valente Brothers TV, once again here from our headquarters in North Miami Beach. Today, I'd like to talk to my brother about the essence of Jiu-Jitsu, the essence of self-defense, and how, with this renewed interest in the self-defense aspect of Jiu-Jitsu, how can we assure our friends watching, our students, that what they're practicing is really for the streets, is really connected to what happens in a possible confrontation.
Thank you for your question. Thank you all for joining us. I think the first concept that we must understand is Jiu-Jitsu. Jiu-Jitsu as a concept, as a principle. And for that we must dissect the word. Jiu-Jitsu. Jitsu means art. So it's the art of Jiu. And what is Jiu? Jiu means the opposite of resistance. Jiu means yielding flexibility. It means that you learn to use your opponent's strength to your advantage. So that principle must govern the techniques of Jiu-Jitsu. If your opponent pushes, you pull. If your opponent pulls, you push. If the opponent wants to get close, you grab and control. If your opponent wants to move away, you maintain distance. So you are never resisting your opponent's energy, you are using your opponent's energy. On top of that, the principle of maximum effectiveness, maximum efficiency, where you're always looking for efficacy, for maximum result in whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, but you're also making sure that you're spending as little energy, as little force as possible to achieve your goal. If you are wasting energy, then it is not a true expression of Jiu.
Professor Pedro, Jiu-Jitsu became famous again, we can say that again, in the world. It was demonstrated by the unbelievable results of Royce in the UFC, showcasing that someone who was weaker could fight and even defeat someone who was bigger and stronger. And those were great examples of the efficacy of Jiu-Jitsu. Now, how can we compare that to a street situation? We've been asked that many times recently, and how does a duel compare to a street fight? So if you can talk to us a little bit about that.
I like to say that Jiu-Jitsu has different expressions, and also Jiu-Jitsu has different ways of training. When we talk about the expressions of Jiu-Jitsu, they can be related to self-defense or not. When we discuss self-defense, then you have different scenarios that could occur. For example, the UFC which you mentioned, and the amazing fights of Royce Gracie and other Jiu-Jitsu representatives who did an amazing job in the early days fighting bigger opponents and showing this ability, usually taking the fight to the ground to be able to defeat bigger opponents. And that format, that expression, is part of self-defense, but it represents a duel, a one-on-one fight where two fighters are looking to defeat each other without having to worry about any external factors.
In a very similar format to what was done in the turn of the century by many Japanese fighters in Brazil as well.
Correct.
Around the world.
Around the world, and I think this has been done from the dawn of time. Because even if you look at the animal kingdom, you see animals playing with each other in that fashion. And human beings have been confronting each other, I think back in the day more than now, to be able to establish superiority. We understand that this physical element is important in human relations.
But some will say that what happens in a ring, what happens inside an octagon, cannot be replicated necessarily in the street because of the variables, because of multiple opponents, because of a concrete floor, maybe weapons, and so many other elements.
That is right, necessarily. But it could also be that you are in a back alley, that you are at home and someone is in your home and they are by themselves, and that becomes more of a duo, right? Kids in school, when they fight, many times people will not get involved and it will be a one-on-one fight, and then it's very similar. Some differences, but very similar to the UFC in its original conception, with very limited rules. It's true that you might have a hard floor, but it could also be on grass. It could happen in different ways. But if your mentality is self-defense, you must be prepared for the different scenarios. And the truth is that most self-defense situations, most real street fights, especially when you're not looking for fights, especially when you're not accepting challenges on the street.
Let's meet outside, me and you.
Yes, this is something that is not only illegal, but something that we don't recommend. However, you could be surprised by an attack, by a bully. And that usually happens in crowded places. Football games, bars, nightclubs, and even walking in the streets with people around. And that type of situation is not the same as a duel, because you do concern yourself, or at least you should concern yourself with external factors. As you said, possible weapons that you might see, or even hidden weapons that you're not aware of, the floor, and multiple opponents that might surprise you. And sometimes it's not even that the person you're fighting, that person has a friend with them. There is a dark human instinct where people watching, they'll just come and kick or strike just for the sake of it. It's terrible, but it happens. So in that case, taking the fight to the ground would not be the best thing to do. Sometimes it happens because the fight might go to the ground whether you want it or not, and you must be prepared for that. But disengagement techniques from the ground are very important, because on the ground you might be exposed, especially if you're on top. You see how it's different? Especially when you are on top. The mounted position is a dangerous position. When you're on top, sometimes on the bottom you're more protected, believe it or not. So these are elements that must be discussed, and having a strategy to keep a good distance, to stay away, to avoid the ground, to avoid the clinch, a strategy that involves good footwork, a strategy that involves a good sense of distance, good distance control, and a strategy that involves striking techniques.
Correct.
That will help you maintain distance, because usually street fights in crowded places are broken up quickly. They don't last too long. So if you can maintain that distance for a little while, usually the problem will be solved. So this idea that the Jiu-Jitsu strategy is always to take the fight to the ground, to close the distance and take the fight to the ground, is at least incomplete.
And to say that what happened in the early UFCs is unrealistic is also not true.
Absolutely
so
not.
It's what our father liked to repeat, liked to say. In Portuguese, it's not 8 and it's not 80. He used to often say what? That the virtue
is usually in the middle.
So with that, I would like to invite all of you to subscribe to our channel. It's very important. Usually we never ask for that, but we decided to start a Valente Brothers podcast. We're working on a concept I'm sure all of you will really enjoy. We're going to start again talking about the history, about the philosophy, about self-defense, about current events, and we would like all of you to be part of it. So please don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and soon we will be launching a very nice Valente Brothers podcast where we will be able to really expand on all these issues and possibly even answer questions.
And if you enjoyed, click the like button. If you didn't, don't click, let us know why, and we are always very open to your suggestions, to your valuable comments and contributions. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.